It's grabbing. Okay. Okay. We will have a roll call starting from my far right.
Sandy Kravitz.
Allison Beckham.
Kim Hartman.
Pam Kirby.
Barbara Perleberg. All board members are present, and we do have a quorum. Our first item on the agenda, item 4, public hearing on proposed fiscal year 2017-2018 expenditure budget and truth in taxation notice. Pursuant to ARS Section 38-431.02 and ARS Section 15905DE, notice was given to the members of the governing board and to the general public that the governing board will conduct a public hearing today, Tuesday, June 20th, 2017, at 3 p.m. in this boardroom regarding adoption of the proposed fiscal year 2017-2018 expenditure budget, ARS pursuant. Our item. Would you like to make comments, Dr. Birdwell, Ms. Smith, before we open for public comment?
I think that Laura needs to share.
You're not, your mic. Okay.
I just want to give you yours. I think that Laura has some presentation pieces that she would like to share
Before public comment.
public comments. So
All right.
would you do that?
Okay,
Excellent. Thank you.
yes. Well, one thing I want to review is there's been some questions about the governing board setting the tax rates.
It's on.
Okay. And the governing board does not set the tax rates.
Speak a little closer. Yeah.
Is that better?
I think put you, yeah, there you go. Lean
All right.
forward.
Everybody can hear me? All right. So governing boards do not set tax rates. We go through a series of calculations based on the budget needs. In prior years, there was a change this year. In all other prior years, you considered your encumbrances left over from the current fiscal year, along with the cash that was due to the district in this current year. Then you add your budget capacity for the next fiscal year, which is the budget you are adopting tonight. And through those calculations, you come up with the money that is needed. There's a House bill that goes into effect this year, which is in this statute, Arizona Revised Statute 15992. I know that wasn't in your packet because these questions came up after the packet went out, but I wanted to highlight on here item F, which is in 15992. And it's at the time of levying taxes as provided in this subsection, the county school superintendent shall annually validate any additional primary tax, school district tax levy amount requests from each school district and levy the sum as follows. And these new rules 1 through 8 are new. We don't get to count our encumbrances anymore. So when I did the calculations for Scottsdale Unified School District, I followed these rules here. This is the first year it's in effect. Tax levies are set in August when you meet with the county school superintendent's office, and the treasurer is also involved. So I do projections, you approve budgets, the county sets the taxes. So that is something that I wanted to make sure you are aware of. Any questions or comments on that?
Okay.
All right.
See no
And
questions?
I think this is on my... One of the other things that was asked about that I wanted to review, There we go. So this is the classroom dollars that we had had several discussions about, where we compare what we adopted in May as the revised budget for FY17 as compared to the adopted budget we're presenting tonight. And in regards to dollars in the classroom, so this is just not our maintenance and operation budget. This is all the funds that are included in the Auditor General's report for dollars in the classroom. One thing we have to remember throughout this whole presentation is we are comparing budgets to budgets. That is not the same as actuals to actuals. So perhaps you would like me, when I do our annual financial report in October, to actually compare previous expenditures year over year. But right now, these are projections. So the reports include a lot of other accounts, as we've covered before, our gift accounts, our rentals, indirect costs, auxiliary. The grant budgets are all estimates right now, and the positions will change throughout. When we load our budgets, it comes from an HR field in positions and controls. So that's how we load our budgets. So in the administration on the 17 budget, which admin is functions 23, 24, 25, the superintendent's office, school administration, and central services. So we reduced that in budget by $3.6 million. The bulk of that is in this supply line. And that's because prior administrations had put unallocated funds here. We are taking those unallocated funds and putting in classroom areas. So that's a major amount there. There is an increase in the classroom of 17 million, and you'll see right here in the supplies, this is some of that money there is down here, but you're going to find that that trickles throughout the budget. We're putting unallocated money in a supply line for the classroom. That doesn't mean they can go spend it as we confirm our budgets. Remember, next year will be current year funding. So those funds will be released if they're needed. I do want to state this number is wrong right here. Whoops. This $4 million. We drilled down into that today, and when we loaded the budget, we loaded the budget at 6610, and it should have been 6631, which is excluded from the Auditor General's report because that's a commodity line. So that 4.3 reduction is not there, so food service will essentially be flat. And we just discovered that, so. These are your plants. Like we had said before, we increased some of this budget because of supplies and also utilities. With the construction going on, we weren't sure how that was going to land. Student support is down $1.1 million. And so some of that is in salaries and benefits. There's an increase in supplies. Transportation is basically flat. As you know, we purchased the new routing software, so we're hoping that that pays off quickly. I know Jeff's done a great job reducing his routes. So these significant changes, administration is reduced by 1.2. As you know, we gave teachers increases and classified as well. This is where the money came from. The unallocated supplies here, actually in all funds, comes down to $4 million, but this includes Medicaid, which we never spend our Medicaid all the way down. It also includes our indirect cost supplies, and we don't spend all of that, so, but we have to budget it. Classroom salaries are increased by 2.6. We've also put in unallocated here of $6.7 million in classroom, and that would include a lot of funds that we don't spend it all the way down, but we need to budget it. There are supplies. You can see a huge increase here, that $12 million. Those are funds that we won't spend it all the way down, but we're allocating it to the classroom. Food service, we have to delete that one because it was a coding error that was in commodities instead of supplies. And we did increase plant services by $300,000 because we outsourced custodial services, and with Prop 206, the minimum wage went up. It'll go up in December. And the utilities went up due to construction. This is just a summary of the other slides that we had in place. So we've decreased salaries and benefits and support services and outsourced services and increased their supplies. Transportation has minor reductions. That's what Board Member Kirby had requested. I think that answered that. I have the details if you needed it.
All right.
Now,
Okay.
yeah.
Are you ready for some questions, or?
Yeah, the only other thing I have on here is the calculation of the tax rate.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Board Member Kirby.
Thank you. Before you move on to the next presentation, I just have a few questions on what you just showed.
Mm-hmm.
So a nomenclature check for us all. Private sector, budgets are set at the beginning of the year. Full year forecasts happen as you move through the year and you get actuals under your belt and you start to change the forecast for the balance of the year. And then, of course, once the year's over, you have a whole year of actuals.
Mm-hmm.
So what you showed us just now, which was the 2016-17 budget,
This current year's budget,
is
yes.
it really the budget that was set at the beginning of the year, and has it changed at all from when it was set last June?
No, that was the May revision we did.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that that's clear for everyone. And I would also like to go on the record, I know you are new in position, and thank you for getting your arms around this as quickly as you have. I'd like to go on the record and request that when we're here next year, that we really try to get a comparison that shows full year forecast versus next year's budget. Because that's the best way that you can see really what's changing, is what's changing versus what we actually did the past year versus what we said we were going to do, but probably did something slightly different.
That's another thing we could probably address in October, where we do the FY17 annual report, and at that point in time, remember, we can revise our teacher, the .106, so I want to bring that back to the board. And then we'll be comparing, by then the people are loaded in the budgets.
Okay.
We'll about have our 40th day there, and our forecast will be much more accurate.
That's fine, but I appreciate that. But next year, when we're sitting here
Yes.
approving the 18-19 budget,
Right.
I still would like to have a full year forecast versus the next year's budget. I don't want to lose that, because that's where we're really going to start driving real understanding of what's in our budget.
Okay.
I want to thank you for addressing, you call it unallocated.
Yes.
I call it budget balance carry forward. It's basically a big contingency item.
Yes.
So thank you for addressing it. What I heard you say is that you've moved it out of administration and into the classroom. So I don't want the public to think that we're trying to artificially overinflate classroom budget dollars, because that's not the intent.
No.
The intent is to actually be more transparent that that contingency's there.
Yes.
So the question I have for you is, in the budget for next year, what is the value of that contingency?
Give me just a second here, and I'll pull it up.
And while you're pulling it up, the follow-up question, which is a little easier, is there a contingency account
No.
that we can create, that can
There
be created?
there is, if you look up here now, I kind of anticipated that question. So this is actually withholding and unallocated. Remember, we are withholding a percentage of the supply budgets because we're going to current year funding.
Right.
So current year funding, we need to be cautious and watch the students come in, make sure that they're there. So this is all fiscal year 2018. I only pulled M&O because I understand that's what you were going to drive. So I assumed that. And here are these numbers here. It totals up to $6,846,141.
Okay, but part of that is the withholding for supplies. So
Okay.
it's, that 100% of that's not contingency.
All
Do you
right,
know?
well, I can fix that. There you go. So now you've got $5,070,228.
Okay. So, just so there's clarity and layperson understanding, I believe the best way to describe that is truly a contingency item, a contingency line. So if bad things happen
Yes.
to us, unanticipated, we have a place to go to address those unbudgeted events.
Yes.
Um,
It's money that it's our go-to money if we have unexpected expenses, or we have maybe more growth than we anticipated, so we have money that would support that.
Okay,
Right. And it also would be budget balance carry forward if it's not needed.
correct. Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
All right. Board Member Hartman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smith. And my two questions actually are very similar to Ms. Kirby's, but I just have just a slightly different slant on it. So, and a couple questions. So when we look at the budget next year, when we kind of go through this, what I think is really valuable is what Board Member Kirby walked you through. But I would expand on that and say current year versus prior year actual versus current year budget. Because really what we want to see is how close were we
Okay.
in where we thought we were compared to budget, and how do we compare to last year's actual, because, you know,
Right.
where are we trending to? So those three columns would be important.
So do you want the original proposed budget from last year rather than the May revision where we did some adjustments? I mean, if you want it from the very beginning of forecasting, that would have been your proposed budget.
Yeah. No, when we're here this time next year, it would be,
This one.
yeah, it would be compared to actual
Right.
and then 18's budget,
Okay.
for me. I mean,
Okay.
that would be
We'll
useful.
get that all clarified, I assure you.
Piggyback?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think the reason we're both honing in on this is, it may be hard to see the value of what we're looking for now, but as we go to current year funding, I believe that we'll start to clearly see the value of looking at those kinds of metrics.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add.
So my question is, what we're looking at tonight, which, by the way, I appreciate you doing that, because that actually, I think, was in response to study session requests that we had, that comparative analysis. We've got budget to budget. But we really do know for 17 what actual plus forecast is, because we have 11 months of actual plus 1 month of forecast. That's not what we're saying, but we do have that. And so my question is, assuming we do have that, but I know you've showed us actual plus forecast in the past, so
Yes.
what would that number look like directionally?
Well,
For
one caveat to the statement is we are still doing buyouts. So
Okay.
that isn't in here, even if I did the expenses right now. So those are just coming in. We've done our big pay. The last payroll was a teacher multi-pays. So we still have general leave payouts.
Okay.
So,
So if we have 11 months of actuals, and then we have 1 month of forecast, which would include those anticipated buyouts. Not perfect, but based on the information we know, would that be?
yeah, except for utilities. Utilities are 12 months. So we have
Right.
till August 28th
Right.
to pay this current year's bills.
Yeah, and in apples to apples, that's always true year on year, so it kind of nets itself
Yeah.
out on those kinds of things.
Right.
So my question still is, because when I looked at budget from last year and budget to this year, and I actually looked at the specific line items, overall categories, right? And then salaries within each one, because that's 70% of the
Right.
rest of them. It jived, if you will,
Yeah,
in
right.
terms of, it's about
Big picture.
2% increase, and it's consistent with the incremental decisions we made over the year. However, that was budget. So the question I'm asking is, if, based on what you know, if instead of looking at prior year budget, we looked at current year actual plus the last month of forecast,
Yes.
how do those numbers compare to prior year budget? And specifically by category, and then compensation being the most significant.
I don't have the actuals on this spreadsheet, so I can't speak to it specifically. But it has changed
Uh-huh.
because we've had other departments, et cetera, need money right now that was in unallocated, so that has been moved. It's an answer I can bring to you at the August meeting with a lot of detail. At that point in time, I could give you those numbers, absolutely, because there aren't any more surprises at that time of year. But there are changes, and I wasn't prepared for that. I was more focused on next year's budget than this one.
Okay. So that would be probably a good next step for
Okay.
August. Do you just have a gut reaction in terms of directionally, are we over or under?
Last year's,
This
carry
year's
forward?
actual compared, well, no, total, like, high level, current year actual,
Current year actual, okay.
okay, which is 11 months of actual plus 1
Right.
month of forecast, as compared to current year budget.
I would
Looking at
say
the- yeah.
it won't be any less than last year. And my forecaster still, in the budget I have 4.5, I'm still going for 6.5 as carryover. So that would be proportionally about the same amount of money, but I don't know that it breaks down in function by that.
Okay. Okay. So one additional question that I have is, I'm not 100% clear, so on that unallocated portion of the supplies?
Yes.
Am I hearing that essentially 5 million of it is a contingency?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And how does that, and by the way, I think contingencies make a whole lot of sense, right? That would be.
Yes, that's a very
less than-
small amount
right,
on
it's less than
150.
3%,
Yes.
exactly, of our entire
You're
budget.
exactly right.
Just like
It's a
we
very small
have
amount.
contingency in our bond, in
Yes.
override, so it's
Yes.
reasonable.
Yes.
Okay. How does that happen?
How does, that it's
Well,
only
that
3%?
unallocated piece, has that been just an incremental buildup over, X number of years?
Yeah, and we have to make certain assumptions, of like what do we charge for workman's comp at this point in time? Like I said, these are budgets, so we're not even sure what those budgets are actually going to be approved for because we don't know exactly what our carry forward is in some of these grants. There's a whole field of contingencies here, along with the salaries that are coming in. Where are the teachers going to be placed? Where are the staff members going to be placed? What are we going to do with SPED? Those things are all part of the factors of things that we can just make, an educated guess at. And as the positions are filled, have we chosen the right value for those vacant positions? Have teachers moved from here to there? Has staff moved from here to there? Months and months ago, when we were looking at this year's budget, we were comparing principals, administrators. What is this position going to come in at? And we made certain assumptions, and then at the first meeting when we discussed budgets in detail in May, I actually came in with some actuals so that you had the differences at that point. Since then, more changes have happened. So this is fluid, and that's all I can say.
Yeah.
But as far as a 3% amount as a contingency, it's a very small amount, but that's also why we have a withholding there, making sure that our students come in, because contracts are contracts, as you well know, so those will be honored. And so the rest of this, and people will ask, why was my budget reduced? Well, because we gave a 2% raise to teachers and a 1% to classified, and then there's this additional 1.06 for classroom teachers. So all that had to come from the same pot. So
I just want to run my logic by you, kind of connecting these conversations together. So and this is to Board Member Kirby's comment too, when I looked at the comparison, I focused on all of it, but I looked at the classroom. And because within the classroom, we're under a magnifying glass in dollars in the
Yes.
classroom. And we did go up, and $13 million of it was supplies. So I specifically then looked at the compensation and salaries, and that went up 2.5%. In fact, I think compensation was like 2% or something like that, and benefits was even a little higher. However, that's compared budget to budget. So is it a safe assumption on my part to say, when that 2017 budget becomes a 2017 actual,
Yes.
specifically in the classroom, compensation and benefit line, that I will still roughly see a 2% increase?
Yes, I would say so, yes, absolutely, Board Member Hartman, I think so. And the other thing is the only thing that will change to that, it would be buyouts. Once again, because that's a forecasted number, and right now I'm estimating, and we put that in the budget, that we thought it would be about a certain dollar value.
Okay, and just, thank you. I think you've just done a tremendous job with this budget, completely appreciate it, and you've walked us through the details, so I feel though you've walked, at least me, all of us, incrementally through this, so what you're hearing now is just my stand-back
Right.
auditor's
Yeah.
hat when I look at the big picture, the sniff test, as they call it.
Yeah.
Is it jiving with all the incremental decisions that we made? And so that's the reason for my questions now, so
They're
thank
great
you.
questions, I appreciate them, so I'll anticipate them better next year and be prepared.
You did a
with those.
fabulous job, thank you, thank you.
A couple bumps in the road, and that's all it
Okay.
takes.
Board Member Beckham.
I just want to reiterate too, thank you, because I feel very comfortable with what you've done and being able to be very transparent and putting it into categories and taking the time to take our phone calls when we had specific questions and being patient with us as we walked through it. I have one request, since you did mention there was a correction to be made, would you mind, after you making that, sending at least me, and I think probably everybody will want, just an updated report so that I can
Okay,
put
the
it
PowerPoint,
down in
yeah,
my
it
file
is-
and I'll have the
yes.
correct one?
Okay, that's fine, and that
Thank
is,
you.
we just discovered that.
Right,
this
no, I know that,
afternoon,
but
yeah.
just, if you can just follow up, that'd be great,
Okay,
thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, I'd like to throw my layman's lens on the conversation, especially Board Member Kirby's and Board Member Hartman's, so that I am confident in my understanding as well. We have taken a lot of contingencies out of other sectors in our budget, different sectors,
Yes.
that time has shown we do not need there. And we have focused them in to the classroom under supplies. The goal, I believe, is so that we really can keep a better, clearer eye on that contingency. The withholding especially, and I guess that's kind of separate,
Yes.
but that's also in the supplies bucket for the classroom. But to be totally clear, that withholding is for staffing. Board Member Kirby mentioned the idea of, are we overinflating, artificially that bucket? But when, in fact, that withholding would go to staffing, would go to teachers, would go to the classroom, it seems very appropriate that that contingency
Yeah.
is in that bucket. And the other dollars that we moved over to supplies, too, I would suggest from what I'm hearing is as we're honing in on those contingencies, we want to be comfortable that they're enough, that they're appropriate. We can still show our priorities in where those contingencies lie, and I think that's what you've done here, is you've put that priority of the classroom, taken that contingency, put it in the right place, and for whatever it's used, it still helps us keep our eye
Yeah.
on what is happening with that contingency. Did it go to the classroom? If not, why? So I do love how this budget really reflects this board's priorities of the classroom, and what I'm hearing is that request to continue on as we look at the 17 actuals and comparing that with the 16-17 budget assumptions or predictions. How close did we come? How much did we need in contingency? How much we use? And as we move from that actual to the next student year's budget, to be able to really connect those dots, I think is important, what I'm hearing from this board. from the budget to the actual, to the next budget, to the actual.
Right.
And we're watching those dollars, making sure we don't have unallocated dollars that we really could be spending
Right.
if we, over time, show that we don't need them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a goal, and I am also very appreciative of someone who cringes every time I hear budget. This process has been very helpful and very fruitful, I feel, and very confident building. So thank you very much. Are there any other comments? I do have a light, Board Member Beckham, or are you all set? Okay. I do not see a light there. All right, did you have any, you had an additional?
Well, let me say something. It's because you guys, you're talking about the prior, the actuals, and the predictive, and it's just really important to understand that there are variables when we talk about funding. And so I think this first year of working with current year funding is going to be critical for us to watch this process and have those budget updates frequently to discuss what we're seeing, because we're really setting a roadway, a paveway path as we go forward in how we're going to do predictive budgeting. So this year's really critical. So again, thank you to Laura and her staff for being so transparent and grabbing all this data, and the work also with human resources, because those FTEs, if not policed and watched
That's right.
closely, can change this little 3% contingency we have in a heartbeat. And so that work that goes back and forth when HR wants to say yes and budget says no. I like that disagreement that we're constantly having. And just for the community to understand, during this time of year, every week we look at enrollment. And every week we're looking at, do we have a class that's gone over in size? Is it time to add a teacher? Do we have a class that has dropped? Is a teacher being moved to a different school? So that fine FTE piece is going on all summer long. So that's the joy of this process. So Laura, thank you your staff as well.
Well, I'll thank my staff. They do this work. They do a great job. They know the district, and we know that the focus is on the classroom. We don't want to hear from a teacher, they don't have what they need. So that's why this is put there, and that's what we will monitor. We will watch to make sure that the money is spent wisely and that the students have what they need and the teachers to be successful delivering the product we need them to do. So.
Thank you. Did you have an additional presentation or part of the presentation?
I did do,
Yeah, we did put a little pause, inserted some questions on you, but I think you had one other.
yeah, that's fine. You do it while you remember it. That's the way I say. I did want to talk about the tax rate. Let's see, I think I have another sheet in here I want to see. Close that one. It's in here or something. There it is. That's the wrong six. There's two 620s here. I'm surprised it lets us do that. I wanted to discuss the tax rates for a minute because we had some inquiries about that, and I did talk that these are estimates. That it is my job to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So one of the things I wanted to discuss is if you go to, this is a fund balance report that we run through our financial software. This tells us the actual amount that we rolled forward from the prior fiscal year. All right, so it's like your beginning balance. And that in prior years was a piece of your tax rate, and this year we don't get to count our ending balance. So if you look at our adjacent ways right here, you see we have a balance currently of $3,746,779.89. Not that anybody counts pennies, but I do. Sorry. It's the way I roll. So it's my job. There's lots of pennies.
It's
So-
okay, we want you to count the pennies.
Yeah, we do. I know it's kind of boring, but it is. So this is last year's, what was submitted to the county. When you do your preparations for tax rates, you submit information to the county school superintendent, and the county treasurer also reviews it. Like I said, you don't set tax rates. I recommend what we need to support our budget. So if you look here on this adjacent ways fund, you'll see that the cash is $2.8 million, correct? And so over here, you should see a beginning of, well, clever, 2.8. That's what you want. All right, and now remember, when you set tax rates, it's in June, July. When you actually take it to the county, it's August. So there are certain assumptions, and that's why the actual tax rate isn't set until August with those other parties involved. And these two, we break out our capital between what is the DAW, the unrestricted capital, which we're entitled to by budget, as compared to the override, which we have told the voters we will only spend it on these things, so we have tighter reins on that money. So these two figures together, 5.389 is what the balance was there, and you can see that it's off $1,000. Well, that's pretty much chump change at this point in time. It's important, but and then you notice that when they did the tax rate, it says that you have $1.5 million in cash. And if you go on our fund balance report, which is your beginning cash, it doesn't agree. It actually says we're negative $3.6 million. So when we set our tax rates last year, they weren't set correctly. So what we have here is it will affect this year's cash balance, which I'm not allowed to count right now. I know I can hit a button here to view this bigger. Oh, that helps a little. Is that big enough? So this is what was submitted, and you can see down here that and on our cover page of our budget, you can see that the primary tax rate was 2.79 for M&O. The capital is 0.03, 0.02 for adjacent ways, for a total of 2.8567. And what happens if you change this beginning cash to equal the real cash balance, your tax rate becomes 2.96. So what that means is we didn't tax enough. We already started out negative in cash, so you can predict that we're going to be more negative in cash at the end of this year. So, and part of that 15992 F8, it states that if you are negative cash, you have to go to the Board of Supervisors. This is all new. Normally, I would make this adjustment on my cash as part of the encumbrance and cash balance. So this is all new. And Scottsdale is running about a month ahead of everybody else, so this isn't something I will work with the county on. But basically, what that means is last year you actually taxed at 2.85. You should have taxed at 2.96, and I'm projecting this year will be at 2.91. But I just wanted to bring that up, that's the tax rate compared to the incorrect amount. Our tax rate has gone up, but had we taxed correctly, we would be going down. And in 17-18, this is how I did my taxes. You take your budget, you take what is overrides, because they're out of a secondary tax rate, and this is how I came up with my calculations. If the county says, no, Lord, we don't agree with that, we pull out our numbers, they looked, and they make the final decision. So that's where I'm at with this, and that's what I put on the cover of our tax rate.
Board Member Hartman?
All right. Thank you. So there's a good conversation that's coming up with the county, so,
Yeah,
yeah,
there is.
all right. So thanks for the heads up
Uh-huh.
on that. Question for you, and I might be, this may not be the most accurate statement, but I think my logic's right. So we had an actual negative cash carry forward.
Yes.
So that's a balance sheet item. Yet we had a $13 million contingency unallocated amount, which in my mind means we got the cash because we're paying on ADM, but we didn't spend it. So the part that I'm not reconciling in my head is, how do we have a negative cash balance, yet we have of $3 million, yet we have a contingency, maybe it wasn't 13 million
Right.
last year, but it was
Right.
something probably in that neighborhood. How's that happen?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm sure that everyone shakes their head and goes, this is not possible. With school districts, your budget is formula-driven. So much per ADM, so much per Group B count, so much for base level, that sort of thing. So you come up with this figure. And day one, you can encumber all these funds, okay? You don't have to have the cash. So if you have cash in this state, and you don't have budget, you can't spend it. And in reverse, we have budget, and we didn't have the cash to necessarily support it. So we will probably end this year more negative in cash. And so it's a problem that we're gonna have to address with the Board of Supervisors, or I'm going to go back in prior years and see if the revenue was posted to the right fund, because it's possible that the allocation wasn't correct. But it's not gonna make up $3 million.
Yeah, and I would think we wouldn't be unique since everything's formula-driven. Or let me ask it as a question. Is this going to be true in other school districts too?
It has happened in other school districts for that very reason. I don't forget when the market crashed in 10, and we had all those problems. There was a lot of tax delinquencies. So anything, and we can still collect on delinquent taxes. So there could be money that maybe it magically appears this year. Maybe we win the lottery on delinquent taxes. I'm not going to bank on that, but that's one thing that you can look at and see, was that the cause of it? And I really need to do a tax analysis on what did we tax for? Was that done correctly? Was the rate set correctly? And was it, delinquent taxes? Is it late taxes? What is the situation? So it's going to take some analysis, but the bottom line, this is where we're at. And when I meet with the county, this will be discussed.
Thank you.
Board Member Kirby?
Thank you. So, again, she did it to me a second ago, now I'm going to do it to
Okay.
her. I'm going to ask the same line of questioning, but a different way. So is it really you said a $3 million, but is it really 3 or is it closer to 5? Because it's $3 million down and $1.5 million up. We were
Yes.
actually $3 million in the red, but it was reported to the county that we were $1.5 million up, so that's
Yes.
closer to a $5 million swing.
But the way I look at it is you brought a budget balance carry forward of how much, and that's how much cash you should have had. So if I tell you I'm bringing forward $4.5 million in M&O budget capacity, I should be bringing over 4.5 in cash
Okay.
as well. Because otherwise, I didn't collect right down the way,
Okay, so
or I didn't assess right.
is it common in other districts that the report says your 3 million, I don't remember what the number was.
Yeah, it's 3.6.
3.5 in the hole, but
Right
what
here.
gets put on this report is that we're $1.5 million up.
Yes, this was sent to the county, this figure was sent to the county. And so,
Is that accurate? Would
No.
that be the normal way of reporting?
no, and someone else should have caught it probably too. We're a pilot district, so we don't share our financial software with the county, but the treasurer still sees our money. So I can't speak to it, I wasn't there, I'll follow up with it.
Okay, but my question is it common practice that what's on the fund balance report that you showed us a second ago, is it common practice to see in districts that what's on that report is not what makes it to the county?
Not in my experience.
Okay. When did you first discover this?
I discovered this when the budget process started getting a little closer, and I met with our financial firm, RBC, because they did projections on our tax rates, and I asked them to come meet with me at the office and review those. And so they had their projections out there because there was discussion over whether that the tax rates were not going to be increased. Well, when you pass a capital override, you've just increased your taxes.
Okay.
But
RG
they said, okay, here's our projections, and I said, by the way, did you know that we were negative 3.6? And kind of that same look,
And they said,
kind of that same
okay.
look.
So RGB, do they,
RBC, yeah.
RBC, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm not-
okay.
Do they do this for us every year, or were they just involved because of the bond and the override?
I believe we had two bonding firms. I believe we had Stiefel to sell the bonds, and we had RBC as our financial advisor on these tax rates, projections that they had done. And so that's why I called RBC, because I saw their bond analysis, and I said, you have an M&O piece here. Where did you come up with this?
Okay, so mistake was made
Mhm.
about this time last year.
Yep.
I mean,
Something, yes.
you discovered it
May,
in May of 17,
yes,
and we're trying to now be transparent
yes,
with our community
yes,
and with the county
yes.
And the treasurer.
and the treasurer.
And we also publicized our truth in taxation, which had not been done.
We didn't publicize it last year.
Apparently
Not that we can find, and it's required each year to do so.
Yes.
And we could not find it
Yeah.
being done last year.
Can I
Okay.
jump in real quick?
Yeah, I'm done.
If that truth in taxation form had been completed last year by previous...
It was completed. The
previous
form completes
staff,
it for you.
The form completes it.
Yeah, when you fill
I
out
mean,
these.
I'm
budget-
wondering,
yeah.
would the error have been caught at that point if it had been done, or, I mean, I know you weren't here, and I
know,
can't speak to...
No, and if you
to,
pull up the forms, it's on the back page probably.
No, the only staff that we could speak to is a new wrong term, Shannon's term, manager, director.
Budget manager.
Budget manager. And being new in her position, she also did not know that it required a public notice. And confirmed that, to her knowledge, it was not done. And she was in that role.
Okay, all right. Board Member Hartman, your light is on?
Oh,
Did you?
I do.
I'm
Yes?
good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Board Member Kirby.
Okay, one last question. Is there potentially any repercussions to the district for this failure last year?
I'm sure, I don't think that there will be. There's
Okay.
last year's,
Other than the tax rate, and I don't want to
Yes.
diminish that, because welcome to Scottsdale, Laura, or Ms. Smith, but
Right.
our community is extraordinarily sensitive to tax rates,
I
as they
understand.
should be. And we owe it to our community to do this right.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for coming on board. Thank you for being transparent, fixing it, moving forward, and please keep us updated on your conversations with the county and how long you anticipate it's going to take to dig us out of this.
Typically, governing board, when you find an egregious error, if you are transparent, forthcoming, and show a corrective action, they're pretty supportive, knowing that you are making a difference going forward. So we certainly will be speaking to the treasurer and this county superintendent about this, and being transparent, as we are now, and making sure that they know going forward that we put safeguards in not to have that happen.
Okay. No other questions? I'd like to add my thanks and gratitude as well. you know, this is a big budget to wrap your arms around, and this could have, one, gotten missed somehow, whatever happened prior. I think we all understand. It's very hard to know at this point what was done and why. But thank you for being here, finding it, bringing it to our attention, showing us the reality and the story of this tax rate. It's going to be tough for the community to digest, fully understand, but I think you've done an excellent job tonight showing as best as you can what should have been, is now, could have been, and that type of thing. So I'm very grateful too that you come on board and brought this focus on doing things correctly and being very transparent about it. So
Well, thank you. That's the way we'll do it.
Okay. Any other presentation? Additional presentation? No other questions from board members? We will move on to item, I'm sorry, I'm going to call for the public comments if we have any. That's okay. Item 4A, the governing board will now hear public comments regarding the proposed budget. Ms. Como, have we had any request for public comments? The floor is open for public comments regarding the budget. If none, yes?
I
Ms.
wanted to
Smith?
say, we also posted this online, and there was an
Yes.
ability for people to submit comments
Correct. Online?
online, and
Electronically?
I
And there were no-
confirmed there was no comments. So
Confirmed
it was
there-
great that it was online and everybody had a long time to review it, so.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, so then if no further comments, we'll move on to item 4B. This is an action item. Do I have a motion to adopt the proposed fiscal year 2017-2018 expenditure budget?
So moved.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right. I then make a motion to adjourn this public hearing and continue with our regular meeting. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Board Member Kirby. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We will move on to item 7, approval of the agenda. Are there any requests for the changes to the agenda? I see none. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. Our second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kravitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right. Now, item 8, public comments. Sandra, do I have all the cards? I know I have one. Yes. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our public comments. In conformance with open meeting laws, the governing board may not discuss or take action tonight on any matters raised during public comments that are not on the agenda. However, the governing board may respond to direct criticism, ask staff to review the matter, or ask that it be placed on a future agenda. As a reminder, each speaker will have 3 minutes. Vice President Kirby will indicate the time with a 30-second warning. We do ask that each speaker introduce themselves for clarity in the record. I now call on Ms. Rose Smith.
Good evening, governing board members, Dr. Birdwell and Sandra. I've been asked to speak on behalf of Mike Jackson, Scottsdale Support Personnel Association President. As an SSPA leadership member and working with SUSD administration, we came to an agreement on the Classified Employment Agreement, the CEA, in our meeting in May. On June 6th, Mike Jackson and Dr. Pam Sitton signed the CEA for 2017-18. Our understanding was that it would be approved by the governing board at this meeting as the terms of agreement take effect on July 1st. When he asked why this did not appear on this agenda, Mr. Jackson was told that this would come before the board in August. Classified employees respectfully request that this governing board sign the CEA prior to the start date of July 1st, 2017, per the terms of agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 9. The board president next calls upon Dr. Birdwell to present the superintendent's comments.
Governing Board, thank you. Tonight, because we are in recess from learning, we don't have student awards this evening or any of our faculty awards, but I thought I would take this time to do an update that is more about systems. You've heard me often say, Well, Scottsdale has many systems that we're working on, but I haven't had an opportunity to give you a full update. So tonight I'm going to take some time, and I ask you to bear with me because there are just some areas that I think when you're spending time talking about budget, there are intertwined systems that affect budget that we've been working on behind the scenes to bring updates, and I think it would be valuable to the governing board to hear some of this work. So take us back in time for a moment. In January 2016, I was brought on as your interim superintendent, and one of the tasks that I was given was to bring forward the need for a capital override. We knew the state was not funding capital. We knew that we needed the community support. But one of the things I assured the governing board with and the community was that I would not ask you to approve capital items until we could assure where our assets were, where our technology was. I'm seeing that, oh yeah, I remember that conversation. So we spent the first 4 months of my interim asking for information about the technology, because this was a critical conversation in our community. How much did we have? What were the conditions? PTOs had donated a great deal of technology. There had been comments and anecdotal information of frustrations of teachers not being able to use the technology they had. So we began to do a deep dive in that. After 4 months of a bit of frustration of not receiving the information needed to be able to share with the board and the community where we were, we employed an individual to come in as a consultant and begin that work. And we hired Mr. Lewis Hartwell at that time as a consultant. And the reason that we hired Mr. Hartwell was because I had worked with him in a prior district where he had completed a forensic analysis where it was so thorough that we actually found employees who had misused district equipment and taxpayers' dollars, and we even found equipment that was being sold on eBay. So it was such a deep forensics that we knew that if we asked him to come in and do the forensics here, we would truly find out where all that technology was. And indeed, he did deliver that, and that was what we were looking for. In addition, he had also handled in that prior district the rollout of every classroom becoming 21st century learning environments, the rollout of every teacher laptop, every smart board, shifting the integration of technology across the district, including infrastructure. Given that experience, we were confident to bring him in and have him do the work here in Scottsdale. Along with that, Mr. O'Brien and I hired PGPC to provide a review of special education staffing. Why was our expenses high? What were we looking at from a systems perspective in that regard, and do some kind of cost analysis. In addition to that, as we moved forward, later we found other needs for their assistance. So why PGCP? Because they had worked with me in a prior district and other districts to do fiscal resourcing, saving the district's dollars, creating transparency, and we were able to later steal one of their employees, and very thankfully, Laura Smith, as you saw, the transparency that she brings to this table. And I've seen that kind of work. And she certainly in a prior district, when our CFO stepped down, came in and allowed our district not to be in receivership, and instead helped our district align our fiscal resources, cut where we needed to make cuts, and save the district money. So those are the two reasons I hired these individuals. After we had a couple employees that resigned, positions opened up. So just to let you know that Mr. Hartwell joined us in October. So he's only been on about 3/4 of a year. And in that time frame, he continued the work. So he had already done the analysis and the review. So what I want to be able to share with you is some of the work that he has done and the dollars that we are beginning to see as a savings of the employees that we've brought on board. And so one of the things that he did was looked at from the moment that we order a requisition out of procurement all the way through the process where that supply ends up in a classroom. So we look at the purchase process, the warehouse process, the distribution processes, the asset management. Well, obviously the first thing we had brought him in to do was find all the technology, which we now know where every piece of technology is, how old it is, if it can be used, what software it has, where we have wireless. But in addition to that, the ability to be able to say, why isn't it working in the classroom? And I think that was the critical piece for me, because I think if we give a teacher a piece of equipment and it doesn't work, they quickly shut down the want to integrate technology. If I can't access my curriculum and it takes 10 minutes for it to download on my computer, I'm not going to keep going back to that because the kids are sitting in front of me. So let me just take you through some of these findings, these systems updates. So first of all, let's start out with the first of that chain, which is procurement. So what we found out, that was actually kind of a joint analysis. Mr. Harwell did a piece of it, PGCP did a piece of that. And in reality, what we asked him for is, I found it strange in Scottsdale the first time that I ran into procurement. It was the first month I was hired. And I couldn't figure out why I could not see the adoption until the day of the board meeting. Because as a superintendent, I had never been prevented from seeing a major adoption until it was released the day of a board meeting. When we were adopting benchmark assessments here, a new system, a very costly system, the superintendent was not allowed, and I kept hearing this thing called the cloak of secrecy or something. I think it goes back to Agent 99 days or something, but I had never run into that in my career. So in 34 years as a school person, I hadn't seen a system like Scottsdale had. And I didn't know if it's because you had been sued in the past or why. So when we had the procurement analysis done, what I found out was we were using outdated processes and outdated forms. And that the individuals in the procurement department hadn't been trained in a while. At no fault of theirs, the dollars weren't there, we weren't providing that training, things change, laws change, and you have to update systems. So the beginning of the chain is broken. That's where procurement wasn't functioning to the best of our ability. So we came in, we are doing training now. During that time frame, unfortunately, the head of procurement also resigned. We haven't been able to replace that position. But we began to address how we actually procure items to begin with to make sure we're in compliance. We ran into the issue when we talked about the superintendent search process. That was a procurement question. So procurement is now on board, running the way that it should, and they have been trained, and we're very thankful for that. Disposal. Items that get out-used and they're no longer usable in the district. Well, what we found was we found some boxes that came in that actually had brand new materials in it that were sent to be sold. Somehow the disposal process wasn't working, and we were sending out brand new materials that were curriculum materials, boxed them back up and sent them back to the warehouse to go out to sell at the state. So we stopped the process, and I stopped all of those systems until we could put a new system in place. And again, Mr. Hartwell assisted with putting in a process so that we weren't selling brand new items and we were getting them back to the classroom. There is an importance to disposing, and there's a process under the state. You can sell your items back, you can send them to the warehouse, the state can sell them. Once we purchase something as a school district, because we're a public entity, we have to go through procedures to do this. That's now in place, so we have fixed that. In the area of technology stewardship, what happened about 8 years ago is there's an email from the superintendent that directs the staff to no longer track anything under $1,000 in value. What you need to know about that is there is stewardship under $1,000. The USFR still says, though, although you're not required to track things under $1,000, you are required, or you should, it is good practice, not required, good practice to have a stewardship list. Take that a step further. In governing board policy, we actually talk about stewardship. We actually, in our governing board policy, say that band instruments will be on a stewardship list in order to make sure we don't lose things. So technology I'll talk about first. We were not asset tagging. 8 years worth of technology that came in this district was not being tracked. Therefore, we had some that we could pull up in the tracking system called Visions, and much of it could not. We sent a task force out to re-tag and find every piece of equipment. A little anecdotal to that. We walked into a teacher's classroom, she had 3 computers. We say to her, which one of these are the district's computer? And she says, well, that one, but these 2 are mine. Upon further conversation, those 2 were given under the PTO. Well, those are still district property and should be asset tagged. So we found there was a real disconnect between when something is gifted to the district, that it too becomes part of the assets. It too is then serviced by the district, managed by the district, and upgraded by the district. So once a PTO buys the computer, we are accepting responsibility of maintaining, cleaning, and servicing those computers. So that's one of the reasons that stewardship is so very, very important. And again, under Mr. Hartwell's direction, our team, and I want to say we have 2 or 3 ladies over there, are amazing, doing a fabulous job. So once they were turned loose to do this work, they were more than happy to do it. I can tell you today that all technology is appropriately monitored, it is appropriately put in the system, and we are uploading it to be able to manage it. There's a system called FOLET, which is a textbook management or resource management system. We use it for textbooks, we use it for the libraries. What we, actually I think we use Destiny, but under FOLET we now have resource management, and we have now also begun to manage our band equipment. So on the band side of the house, the band equipment was not asset tagged and did not have a stewardship, so we were in breach of our own governing board policy. Upon checking all that we had purchased, we had to find about $500,000 worth of band equipment that was missing. We narrowed that down to about $360-some thousand. We found $163,000 worth of equipment in a warehouse in Mesa that did repairs that had been sitting there for 2 years. We had paid all the bills. Some had been repaired, some hadn't, but it had never been picked up. We have since picked all of that equipment up. We sent a security team, thank you, James, over to get some of that equipment and bring it back and get it back in the possession of the district. So we've been able to recover $163,000 worth of band equipment. When we looked at the overall asset management in our vision systems and began to look at that information, basically we had $5.2 million worth of unaccountable assets that we weren't able to track. And again, with the work with Mr. Hartwell and his team, we have been able to narrow that down, and now we are reflecting, as of June 20th, we reflect only a unaccountable $2.2 million rather than the $5.2 million. Now, I want to explain that to you. It doesn't mean that it got little feet and walked away. What it means is it had a bad system of tracking. For instance, a server that cost $10,000 had a lifetime warranty, and it might have got sent back to the company, but the asset didn't go on the new computer or the new server, so therefore that server is missing, and that's $10,000 of budget missing. Although it was replaced appropriately, the tracking system is not functioning properly. So it's not to say that $2.2 million worth of materials were stolen or walked out of the district. It's not to say that some of them haven't. It's to say that the system is broken and needed to be fixed. We now have a clean data, so we know what's there and what's not. We'll begin to remove those things that don't exist, that are too far for us to go back and recover. And everything coming in is now being tagged appropriately, put in a system, and being tracked. And a transfer system is being put in between buildings. So if I transfer a set of equipment out of my school to another school, we know that it's been transferred there. We still have other assets to track. We still need to get into our maintenance and operations, our everything from lawnmowers to golf courts to power drills to, there's still a lot more assets to be able to continue to do. But I can tell you this, we have a system in place that's now allowing us to appropriately account for all assets that the governing board and the community have purchased. So we are reconciliating. In the aspect of cell phone management, it's always a question every district I go to, how much is your cell phone bill? Well, I can tell you that Scottsdale was paying between $17,000 to $18,000 a month in cell phone bills. What we discovered is 64 people who were non-SUSD employees who were still being paid for on the cell phone bill. Part of that was because we had 13 authorized managers and nobody took people off when they left the district. Therefore, we continued to pay for the services. Mr. Hartwell's team again discovered that. They've cleaned it up. We're down to $12,000 to $13,000 a month. We're saving $5,000. So basically, we lost $300,000 over a 5-year period. That has been fixed. It has been corrected. We no longer worry about whether or not we have phones out there or people have access. That will not occur in the future. Basically, the bills were just thrown into a box and put up on a shelf, and somebody said, IT will take care of it, and no one looked at them. We just paid the bills. We don't do that anymore. We analyze and make sure we look at every invoice. Infrastructure. The district was on a 1 gig WAN, and that's our network that we run information in and out of, and it was limited security for intrusion. We have, over a 3-month period, negotiated the contract for new services. Our provider is now going to provide 2 gigabytes with the ability to turn it up to 10 during testing, so when the students are all online taking the state assessment, we don't crash. We were losing about $100,000 on that. We are now, we've gained $100,000 in that negotiation process. Again, I have to commend Mr. Hartwell for his work. Because of his business background and his ability to beat up those vendors and not shy to say, is that the best deal you can give us, we've been able to negotiate a savings for the district. The wireless disconnect. We had an issue where teachers couldn't understand why in my classroom I can't use technology but the teacher next door gets to. So we did a heat map analysis of the entire district in every school, and now we know where the wireless works and where it doesn't work. And we are working with PTO, the Hopi Dads and others, that when they purchase computers, that we make sure those computers are going into an area where the wireless does work so that equipment doesn't sit unused. So big improvement in that area, along with getting some E-rate support. Another little finding we found is that the battery backups for the server systems for the schools had not been replaced. Now, I don't know if that was a budget cut, don't quite understand the history. It's about a $70,000 ticket. But what was happening at Saguaro High School is every time we had the rolling electricity, which Scottsdale tends to have, I don't know if you get that at your house, when all the lights go off and then they come back on. When that happens to a school, it shuts down your server. And when you shut down your server and you start it back up, you lose everything. So we would spend an entire day recovering and re-imaging that server to bring the school back up. The school had to go a day without service. Well, the reason that was occurring was because there was no battery backups. Battery backups is a common practice because you can damage equipment when you don't do that. Wherever that decision was made, the reality is we have now appealed through the E-rate process, and all of those battery backups are being installed and the systems are being protected. So, and that's not coming out of our budget, it comes out of E-rate. That money is available once you just ask and apply for it. So we're very fortunate, again, that the individuals overseeing that understood those processes and put them into place. There was a little system that was new to me here in Scottsdale. It's called off-lease computers. And the reason I just had an experience in another district, but here's what I've discovered after working with the team to analyze it. About 6 years ago, it was determined that the district should do some purchase off-lease computers. So here's what happens. It means you're buying 3-year-old computers. In the world of computers, you're going to get very little life, and not only is it the computer that can't operate, but the operating systems themselves are outdated. The security systems are then vulnerable, and the student information becomes vulnerable. So we had vulnerability on every level. The fact that the systems couldn't run most software that existed, that the computers were constantly breaking down. We had to hire 2 people to just fix computers, so we had a staffing cost. So when you start talking about load rates, we had about a $200,000 productivity loss because of leasing computers. So going with the new computers that you approved, we thank you because we've discovered that that system doesn't work well in schools. And quite honestly, the operating systems don't handle most software that we use in schools today because they are very graphics heavy. In Dr. McCauley, remember that Mr. Hartwell is one strand under Dr. McCauley. Then there's this other strand called Student Information Systems. So we've been working very hard to update those. And why is that important? Because if the student information systems are not functioning properly, then your ADM and your ADA is affected. So our attendance and our accuracy of our ADM is critical in our funding. So the first thing that we began to look at, and Carol Forsgren is here, and we brought her in as a compliance specialist, and she's done an amazing job. But just to remind you, the lost ADM under the JTED, the fact that under career and technical education, we were not reporting the student membership properly. And when in doing that for our satellite courses, we were losing $120,000 to $200,000 a year that we've now recouped because of the work and the cleanup that they've done. So again, we fixed the system, saving the district hundreds of thousands of dollars. We also had lost ADM on kindergarten students that qualified for 1.0 FTE, but we weren't recording them properly, and we weren't gaining the dollars for those who could be recorded. And that was about $66,000 a year that we were losing. We also had lost ADM due to what's called an integrity error. In other words, nobody came in and reconciled or came in and fixed the errors that came through the system. And that often happens when we are communicating between systems that are proprietary in the district and you're trying to talk to ADE and their systems. And you have to go back and look for errors. It's kind of like doing the balances in the budget. There will be errors. Last year we had 17,000 errors. We've corrected all of those. If we had not corrected that, if we had used past practices, we would have lost $339,000 in ADM. So I thank Carol. Every penny that we pay her has come back to us over and over because she has already saved us about $339,000 this year in accuracy of her work under ADM. We had a misrepresentation in FTE calculations. And that was because of the way that we did not set up Synergy correctly in order to calculate in our student information systems. We have corrected that. We are now calculating all students correctly. We loaded in the bell schedule so that all students could be correctly accounted for. Those had not been put in properly either. That has been corrected, and that system is now updated. I'm very pleased again in regards to that. Instructional minutes had been misconfigured. We've corrected those. We will now work with the high school counselors and instruct them that students must be enrolled in at least 2 periods or we do not get any funding whatsoever for them. We also counted every student for 5 classes, and not every high school student takes 5 classes. Some kids take 3, some take 4, and that's okay, but you got to record them and report them to the state properly. We are now doing that, and we have fixed that system. So again, a fixing of systems. Special education reporting this fall, we only had 70 special ed students. That's not true. We actually have 2,648 special ed students. But according to the information system, we had not recorded those students as special ed students, which means that you wouldn't receive any funding for those students. We corrected that. We've now put in and we uploaded 2,580 students will receive full funding. In a year of current year funding, we cannot make that error again, and we will not make that error again. And that is tied to, from the moment we do class rosters for special ed students, that they get correctly uploaded so that the ADE and the ADM match appropriately so that we get the appropriate funding for special ed. That was significant. Again, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Data entry errors. We had multiple data entry errors. Student sections entered in withdrawal dates are critical because it affects many aspects of funding. And when you're talking current year funding, when a student withdraws, the money goes with them. So that must be corrected. We're training registrars. We'll make sure that the data has been cleaned by the SIMAR department. We've done training this year. We'll continue to do more training next year. We'll continue to work with the schools and the sites so that we don't have that lost. End of the year courses were not tagged properly in the accountability system. Therefore, students who should be tested in the end of the year courses for ADE were not being tested appropriately. That has been fixed, and we will make sure that we continue to do that in the appropriate manner. Foreign exchange students were not appropriately tagged in the system, and therefore, the foreign exchange students were being identified and submitted to the state. That means that the foreign exchange students counted in your state metrics, your state assessment data, and your graduation data, although they cannot graduate from Arizona. Therefore, they were seen as non-graduates, therefore lowering your graduation rate. That has been corrected and will not continue in the future. The summer graduates were not added in the cohort and not shown as graduates that would have improved the graduation rates, but had not been done, and therefore we've corrected, and we will do that going forward. We had grades that had not been put into the CUME file. We have corrected that, and we'll be doing that going forward so that the student CUME files are accurate. Dual enrollment participants were not identified properly for the College and Career Ready Index. And when you look at state labeling for next year, you get points for college and career readiness. So those dual enrollments must be tagged properly or they will affect our overall identification. That has been fixed. We are working on creating a military tag because students who go to the military we will also receive points for. AP and honor courses were not identified to qualify for career and readiness indexing, and we've corrected that so that going forward we can count that for our accountability as well. Our cohorts versus our grade levels are incorrect and have not been fixed. When a student takes their their first enrollments, they go into a cohort and they remain with that cohort. So we have to fix that system going forward. That is critical. We're working on it this summer. We also found that there was no 45-day screening occurring under special education, which is a federally mandated as well as a state law. We have fixed that going forward, and the psychologists will do 45-day screenings. Again, open enrollment was not tracked properly, and that's why we could never answer to you where the students came from, but now we can, and we can also geocode for you. So please know that Dr. McCauley's department has fixed that. Gifted and immigrant needs reporting has never been filed by this state, by this district, and is required at the state level to be filed. We are now correcting that, and we'll file who our gifted students are and who our immigrant students are. Security and data privacy protocols were not in place. So to let you know that when an employee left that had access to the state data, they were not withdrawn for state access and could have continued to look, including district prior administration, because no one removed them at the state level. That has been corrected and will not occur going forward. Security protocols for student information systems. In other words, there are people who have access to student data that shouldn't have access, and they will no longer have that. An example of that is I had a teacher who unenrolled a student. A student should never be unenrolled by a teacher, only by a registrar and only by an administrator. So those access are being changed. The termination of employee access is really critical because it's a FERPA violation. That has been corrected and will continue to be corrected at the state level as we go forward. So when we talk about data quality practices, I want you to know that Dr. McCauley and her team are doing amazing work. They met with great resistance. This is the way we've always done it in Scottsdale. Mr. Hartwell and his team have done amazing work. They met with great resistance. This is the way we've always done it. But it's not in compliance, and we will be in compliance moving forward. What I need to emphasize is that we are fixing, and I know I've taken a lot of criticism for saying systems are broken, but I hope by giving you this update, what was broken is now fixed. And going forward, Scottsdale has a bright future in front of it. We have more to find, however. I want to end by saying this. We are still going to be working on many future agenda items. For instance, the RICO copier contract, the transportation cost savings, the solar contracts. We've done our first review, and I'll bring to you in August and then again in October. We have a dozen solar contracts. Only one breaks even and all the rest lose money. Scottsdale, it's not a bad philosophy or system, it's simply we have bad contracts. So according to the individuals I'm working with, the specialists in this area, they're some of the worst contracts they've ever seen. So we need to fix those. Satellite and cell tower issues continue to be an issue. We have some really bad contracts. Again, it's a contract issue. Our IGA agreements will continue to be reviewed. Our investment account at Wells Fargo, we're still trying to determine the dollars and where they've come from, where they're going, and why there isn't accuracy with some of those. Our prepaid contracts, we prepay a whole lot of people, millions of dollars in advance that they then get interest on, and we do not receive any. We're looking at our trust accounts, our transcript validation, our grade verification, our athletic equipment review for inventory and conditions to make sure that they're safe for all of our students. I will say that Cliff has done a great job in this area, but we want to make sure we continue to support it. Arts equipment is like band equipment. Don't even want to go there yet. So overwhelming to do the band equipment. M&O equipment, I said, the drills, all of the trades, the tools, the lawnmowers, the golf carts, all of those things need to get in the tracking system. Our textbook audit, we have pretty good track of our textbooks. I just want to make sure that what I see is accurate. Attendance is a bit of a problem and needs to get fixed. We'll be working on attendance next year as we go forward doing things correctly. Records retention, possibly going paperless and using digital retention. Creating a user-friendly enrollment application process, our ongoing cross-training for the staff, and our verification of discipline. We have a disconnect between the discipline and what's in the system and what actually has happened. So there's a lot of issues to be done. Dr. McCauley's done a great job, but here's how I see it. Our review process was the tip of the iceberg. We have a lot of work to do. However, this team, who has taken a lot of criticism, this team that's taken a lot of browbeating, needs to know they've done a great job. And from this superintendent to them, thank you, and I commend you for the amazing work you've done in just 7 months. And Laura, since February. Laura has been on with us since February, and to have created the transparency that she has created in such a short time frame, we need to commend these people, not bring criticism on them. I value people by the fruits of their labor. And I can tell you that that asset team, those two ladies over there, should be commended for the work that they've accomplished once they were empowered to do so. And Carol and her team and the work that they're doing should be commended for what they're doing. Going forward, our goal is to prevent poor performance audits, FERPA violations, lost equipment, to create systems that assure the taxpayer that every dollar is being used in the manner that it should be used, and that Scottsdale is on top of its game at all times. Again, we will continue to hire a team that can fix the systems going forward. We will support that team, and we will make sure that we create a transparency so that this community sees what we see, which is Scottsdale moving forward. I appreciate the work that's been done here. I know that we come under great scrutiny because we are here fixing. Some people call us change agents. I don't think we're change agents. We're here to move the district forward in systems that support learning. And all of these systems that I shared with you tonight affect learning. In one way or another, they will affect learning, whether it's in the fact that more dollars have to be spent because something's missing, or the fact that the teacher can't get on the wireless system and access the curriculum the way that they should because the system that we've been sold doesn't work, or the fact that we just simply are wasting dollars in an area that doesn't come back to the classroom. I assure you, Governing Board, that our team will continue to fix these systems, and that we will continue to get better and better as we go forward. I appreciate my team's work, and I stand behind my team. I again measure them by the fruits of their labor, and they have proven to me already in a short 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, how amazing Scottsdale can be. And so I thank you for bearing with a very long superintendent update, but I assure you that as we spend bond dollars and capital dollars, they're going to the right place, and they are going to support learning, because that's what we will do going forward. We will support the students, the teachers, and their administrators in the learning process. Thank you for your patience.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Birdwell, for those comments. I'm going to make a little comment here in response to, as a board member before your arrival, I was a board member who had grave concerns about the health of our systems and the strength of our accountability in our district. And I too, as a board member that felt that way, had a little scrutiny put upon myself. And I wasn't alone. So feeling that way and feeling very confident that there was we had to go a long way to be truly healthy and to truly be a strong SUSD. We had a lot of work to do. So I am also incredibly grateful for not only the work of your staff that you have brought here, the cabinet, and everyone that has joined in this work, that especially staff that were already here in SUSD and has recognized how important this work has been. I am grateful for that. And I am grateful that you are here in this district doing this work, very supportive of it, and recognize that it was very needed, very necessary. So I will just make a response, and I see other board members that would like to also make a response. Board Member Kirby.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, you brought back some memories. And I guess I'm grateful that I can look back and laugh about that now. But at the time, it was not easy, being on the side of trying to get to much of what Dr. Birdwell just laid out. So while it's disappointing to hear that our past financial stewardship wasn't up to the standards that the Scottsdale, Arcadia, Paradise Valley, and surrounding communities deserve. I'm just as grateful to hear today that you and your team are working to address the financial and the stewardship issues as I was grateful months ago when you came to us and you had the honest conversation about our academic achievement in this district. Because, you know, it's, what do they say? It's the first step. You have to admit that you have opportunity. You have to admit that you have a problem before you can even begin to fix it. And as a board member in year 6, for the first 4 years, there was no admission that there was any opportunity for improvement. So I'm grateful that you and your team are here. I'm very grateful that you're not ignoring it, that you're addressing it, you're fixing us, you're moving us forward. And I want to thank each and every member of your team, even if they weren't specifically mentioned tonight in your comments. I want to thank you all for your hard work to get Scottsdale back on track.
Thank you. Board Member Hartman.
So thank you. Thank you for your leadership and your courage to shine a flashlight on not only academic performance, but financial and good stewardship, and your ability. Talented people attract other talented people, so very much acknowledge the talent that you've attracted to the district, and thank you for your leadership in leading your teams as well. You know, when new talent joins the bus, there's always the side critics, the judge critics. So I hope those same judge critics also have the same courage to step up and say, hey, it's been different, but it's good, and you find that support. I know you'll find the support amongst us, but I hope the community's in the same place. The one question that I have is, you know, absolutely there's a team that's doing this great work, and it takes the village, right? It takes really all the way down to the site level, that leadership and in the classroom to actually pull all this together. What I'm wondering, I know some other districts do this, but is there a challenge that we could put forward for as we move forward that there's because these are one time, some of them are recurring and some of them are one time, but if there's the ability to share a district-wide small bonus, not that you can do, you know, a significant amount, but a one-time bonus. I know some districts that have had financial success have had a 1% bonus, which is, you know, about $500 for a $50,000 role. When I was just tracking the numbers that you were sharing, I stopped counting at a certain point, only the ones I could count, but there was a 1% in there. There was over $1 million finding, and when 1% is about $700,000, I know, in certified, but can we explore what a team bonus might look like if we give you the challenge of, if that contingency, we don't spend it because we find other pockets, is there a way to share that back? Because I have a feeling that others will start stepping up with other great ideas and observations. So I just put that out there as a potential challenge, opportunity, and something for us to talk about.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Board Member Kravitz.
Thank you, Dr. Birdwell, for that comprehensive update about what's been going on behind the scenes to improve the various systems in our district. Even when not being on the board and sitting out in the audience or being in our schools, sometimes you'd see something and it would be a real head scratcher as to why something was the way it was. So I appreciate this report because everything you mentioned, it directly impacts not only our finances, but most importantly, it impacts our students. And so I hope that your report, while overwhelming, renews our community's confidence in our district. And I additionally would like to thank Mr. Hartwell, Ms. Smith, Dr. McCauley, and their teams for all the work that they've done. That's been going on behind the scenes that most people don't realize it's going on, and it does directly impact what goes on in our classrooms. So thank you again.
Thank you, and please know, that was highlighting some systems that heavily tied a budget, but Susan Doyle and others have been doing work in human resources, and I know we'll be bringing some transportation concepts for savings forward this fall. They're just a deeper conversation to have. So, again, to the staff that has taken this journey to Scottsdale with me, and those who have been here, who have jumped on board as well, because it's not just new people, we truly are doing the right work, the calling, and that is creating a system that is about students, and I thank them for being part of that and having that faith, and for the governing board for supporting us and doing such great work. When you look back on life, you get to say, I did what mattered. So thank you.
Thank you. Could not agree more. All right, we will move on to our work at hand. Item 10, consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Thank you. Board Member Beckham, thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right. We will now move on to our first information discussion item. Agenda item 11A, update on 2016 bond projects. Dr. Birdwell, would you like to present?
I think Lewis's issue, is this going to, I'm not sure which one is first. Wait. I think it's Laura. I apologize. Laura, too. Tag team. All right. I guess it's going to be a tag team moment. See, we complimented her, so she got lost.
Send my team to truly watch.
So it's your update on the bonds projects. All right. Now you know where you're at?
Yeah. Okay. Am I going to deal with that on there or on my sheet? So, right here. This was sent out to the to the board in the packet. These are the budgets up here that we have on adjacent ways for each one of these projects that the district has slated. This is also where we're at on the progress, on each project. So what I will go through this first one on the track and field. The engineering budget on here is $525,000. The procurement budget is $12,000. The estimated project was 7.5. The first GMP is 7.3, which means the total CMAR project is 7.4, and when you add it to the upper lines, it's actually 7.9. Down below, you have your cash. Remember that cash and budgets are two different things. So the cash on this, on the adjacent ways expenditures, there was no budget there. There'll be no expenditures. To date, we have spent in this whole project line $1.8 million on the track and field, and that is in total. Notice on the adjacent ways line here, we haven't paid any expenditures on adjacent ways. These budget lines on the top are, every project seems to have an estimated cost in adjacent ways of approximately $1 million, which is why we are taxing for more adjacent ways. The only one that I have a solid number on is your Cheyenne, and that's coming in at $879,285. None of those bills have been paid, but when they come in, they'll be paid from this adjacent ways cash line. Over to the side, I have the current cash balance. So we have, if you remember on the fund balance, I said our balance right now is $3.7 million in adjacent ways. As we pay, that will be reduced so that you can see how it's holding up. We have sold $42 million in bond money. And so, or it was 40, it's more than that. That's our balance right now with what we have paid out. So this simple report tells you what the budget lines are as of this moment And we have also spent, in the bond money, some of Dennis's put in for some life cycle projects, which the board has approved. And the cost of issuance for these bonds comes out of the bond fund, and that is $148,283. So those have all been paid, and that gives you kind of a simple running balance while we get all our systems in place on here. So.
In addition, Governing Board, remember that we said that there would be a committee, and the committee will also see this information, and they will meet twice a year. So when people get back from vacation, we'll have an opportunity. We know we have the first couple members that have accepted. We're sending out some invitations, balancing the committee of one per learning community, and then some school administrators, along with those parents who will be meeting and going over twice a year to make sure that we fall into the categories designated by the voters and not to exceed more than the limit under the law. So from this kind of work and tracking, they also will track to make sure that we're online. Now, there is no statute requirement. We've done the research, the legal team has done that research, but we feel it's being transparent, and we are going to do that, and we'll have those meetings twice a year. When that full committee gets put together, the governing board, we will bring them and introduce them to you. Our first 2 members have accepted, and I'll continue to recruit individuals to serve on that and keep you apprised. But this is the kind of information they too will be reviewing to make sure we're within the categories.
Oh, we have some questions. Board Member Kirby?
Thank you. Mine's not that hard. It just occurred to me, if you go over to the right a bit,
Am I right?
yeah, that very last column,
Yes.
cash balance 42 million. And I'm assuming that if we get to the end of year 1 and we have a cash balance not yet spent or available, it just rolls forward to the second year. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, and this helps me project when we need to make the next sale as we're getting these applications in and we're meeting with the contractors. Remember, we know we're going to pay out this whole track and field. So that's going to come out of this line, so I know that that's going to occur, by September. And these other projects, as they progress, will help me determine when we're going to need to sell the next bonds.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we monitor the tax interest increases
Right.
to make sure that we get the best interest rates before the next increase. So we monitor not only when we need it, but we also monitor the interest rates.
All right. Board Member Beckham? Oh, nope.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you for putting together the report.
Sure.
All right. Board Member Hartman?
Thank you for the high-level detail, because I know we've been asking for this, so I appreciate you pulling this together.
Sure.
Just a quick question. Would it be reasonable to ask, this is like you give a mouse a cookie, right? so I apologize in advance, but I don't think this is a big deal at all, because it's
All right.
just kind of subtotal columns. Would it make sense? I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me from my logic. So underneath each one of these columns, there's the estimated budget, so we'll look at the first purple column.
Okay.
7.5,
Yes.
and there's the total project, 7.9, so we would have an over-under item
Okay.
for each one of them.
Sure.
And then if you kind of carry it all the way across,
All
then
the
you
way
would do it
over.
all the way on the end, so that we know where we are at this
Yes.
point in time. And recognizing
Yes.
these numbers change.
Yes.
But it's always a point-in-time view to know if we're under, over.
Sure.
So that, we're playing the long game here for 3 to 5
Yes.
years, so we know where we're headed.
Yes,
Okay.
that's no problem at all. Good request.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. No further questions? Additional presentations? No? A second half? No? All right. Okay, then. We will move on to our action items. First action item is 12A, approval of guaranteed maximum price, GMP number 1, for RFQ number 17081, construction manager at risk services for the Hopi Elementary School rebuild project.
Governing Board.
Thank you, Mr. Hartwell.
Dr. Birdwell and Sandra, I have the pleasure of of bringing forward Hopi after a long bit of work here. It's recommended that the governing board approve the guaranteed maximum price for RFQ number 17081, construction manager at risk services for the Hopi Elementary Rebuild School. You awarded the RFQ 17081, construction manager at risk services for Hopi School Rebuild Project to Core Construction on April the 25th, 2017. The architectural portion of the project was previously awarded by the governing board to Hunt Caraway on December 2016. The district team reviewed GMP1, determined the amount to be fair, reasonable, and recommends award to be made to Core Construction in the amount of $2.905444. The scope of the work included in this GMP includes the following: mobilization of construction and fencing, Phase 1 demolition and abatement, surveying, staking, Phase 1 earthwork and paving, and site utilities. This project will have multiple phases and will require an additional GMP, which will be presented to the governing board for approval at a future meeting. This procurement was conducted in accordance with ARS 41-2578 and ARS 41-2579, Article 5, Procurement of Construction for Specific Services, and Arizona's School District Procurement Rules. It does align to the district goals of academic achievement, physical stability, external communication, organizational health, and school safety. Questions?
Thank you. Do we have any questions regarding this action item? I see none. So I will make a motion that we approve the guaranteed maximum price, GMP number 1, for RFQ number 17081, construction manager at risk services for the Hopi Elementary School rebuild project. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. We next move to item 12B, approval of construction services for RFQ number 17081, construction manager at risk services for Hopi Elementary School.
Right. This is in addition to GMP1, and it is recommended that the governing board approve construction services contract RFQ 17081, construction manager at risk services for the Hopi Elementary Rebuild Project. The construction services contract has been reviewed and vetted by SUSD Legal, and both parties agreed to the language as presented for this project with multiple GMPs. The construction services contract approval completes the procurement process of this portion of the project, which allows for construction and project management activities to commence in order to meet final completion. The project will have multiple phases and will require an additional GMP, which will be presented for the governing board at a future meeting.
Board Member Hartman. Oh, sorry. Board Member Beckham? Yes?
Yes, I'd just like to just make a note that my understanding is that I'm approving the fundamental terms of the contract, and that I'm relying upon legal and the design team has vetted and negotiated the detailed points in the contract.
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
correct.
All right, if no further questions, I will make a motion that we approve the construction services for RFQ number 17081, construction manager at risk services for Hopi Elementary School. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. We move on to item 12C, approval of award for pre-construction services for RFQ number 17090, construction manager at risk services for rebuild project at Pima Elementary School. Mr. Harlow.
Governing board, Dr. Birdwell and Sandra. This won't be quite as long as the dissertation that Dr. Birdwell just went through, but I do have a lot to talk to. Yeah. It is recommended that the governing board approve the award of pre-construction series for request for qualification 17090, construction manager at risk for rebuild project at Pima Elementary School. The governing board approved the APDM factors to solicit a construction manager at risk for rebuild project at Pima Elementary School on May 4, 2017. The request for qualifications, RFQ, was published in the official newspaper of Maricopa County.
I'm going to give you a break on this. They've read it.
Oh, have they?
Okay? So
Okay.
unless there's something new or particular, you don't have to read it to them. They read that whole
Oh, well,
thing.
good. Thank you very much,
so
Dr. Birdwell. Thank you so much.
I'm going to save you that dissertation.
I appreciate that.
I'm sorry for my poor modeling.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Board Member Hartman.
All right, thank you. I do have one question, and I did read it to validate the comment, so
Okay.
thank you.
One never knows.
And when I read it, there was one question I just wanted you to
Okay.
walk us through. It talked about that the scoring weighting for the criteria changed, increasing the method of approach over the qualifications and experience.
Mm-hmm.
And can you walk us through why that was necessary? I know it was really close in the rating, but
Right.
why was that weighting shifted, and what's
Well,
the
in this-
benefit to us?
Thank you, Board Member Hartman. In this particular case, there were 3 general contractors that actually sent in proposals. They were extremely close on the first rating. They were close enough that we had to go through an interview process, which took us through the next set of ratings. The points were very, very close, and so we went through an interview process with each one. We gave them 45 minutes to present. What they saw was their capability to work on a live campus, but not only a live campus, but we have baseball fields we were able to save. We have utilities, power utilities that we're going to have to put underground. We have utilities with cell towers that fortunately we're not going to have to move because we did flip the site. But one of those cell towers is actually tied to one of our buildings. And Dr. Birdwell did mention earlier that we have some challenges with some of our cell contracts. Well, that's how we found out that there's an issue with some of our cell contracts. So we have to work to make sure that we get that through because their power comes through us on that. So we went through the rating and rankings. The numbers came out, and it was still very close at the end. And then it was determined with the committee in general that the one single contractor had an ability to work. We have to work on what's called live campuses. A live campus is where we have children that are going to school while we're trying to build around them. So in this particular case, we have a live campus, children are going to school, but we have utilities we're moving. And this particular contractor had the best solution for us going forward with that. So, and it was still close at the very end. Yeah. The other portion of it had to do with economies of scale. Where this contractor learned off the first one, learned off the second one, and now we're into this one. So there's an economies of scale and some savings that were realized too. So it was very helpful. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question. So that makes sense. So the method approach was taking into consideration that there's students on campus and how would you tackle this so that there's least disruption as possible, and then economies of scale or learning, right? Lessons learned that you can
That's
carry
correct.
forward. Just wondering, because there are lessons learned, and that does definitely benefit us and the contractor, do we expect to see potentially cost savings because they can carry forward those lessons learned, and that method approach does make them a little bit more efficient in the process? Will we potentially see that translate back to us in cost savings in some reasonable manner? I mean, I realize they're there to make money too, but.
Board Member Hartman, absolutely great question, and we'd like to say because of the economies of scale, there'll be a huge impact on the final build. Every build is different. Pima's got utility challenges. Dr. Nance was kind enough to move some students out of one of the units so that we could demo that one so we wouldn't be so close to the students while we were building. So there's an abatement that has to happen fairly quick on that side. If you take a look at Hohokam, You would think that would be fairly straightforward. However, at Hohokam, where we're going to build the school, there's about a 3-foot drop where it's actually irrigated right now, that we've got to bring in a tremendous amount of soil, compact it, and get ready for the build where that's at. So the cost goes up because we've got to bring in extra soil to do that. In terms of the build itself, there will be some areas that we're going to be able to get economies of scale because we're going to have the same furniture, we'll have some of the same designs that will be able to help that. Even in the cost to design it, because we'll have essentially the same classrooms, what have you. So yes, there will be realized some savings as we go. I just don't know what that is right now.
And I'm not asking you to provide a number now, but as we go forward, that's probably going to be a reoccurring question.
Yeah.
So to the extent you can share that, and we can just,
Yeah.
be in a fair situation with our
Absolutely.
providers too. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Board Member Beckham.
On this particular action item, it's for the pre-construction services that this particular contractor will be providing for Pima. So in the future, if you could just include what the scope of that work is in your narrative, that would be helpful. We got the background, but it didn't give the scope of work of what we're
Well,
actually purchasing.
Thank you, Board Member Beckham. This one is strictly approving the contractor.
Oh, strictly approving the contractor?
That's correct. We
Okay.
haven't approved the contractor yet for Pima, and that's what this does.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Okay, no further questions? Ready to make a motion? I'm happy to do this one. I make a motion that we approve the award for pre-construction services for RFQ number 17090, Construction Manager at Risk Services for Rebuild Project at Pima Elementary School. Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Beckham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you
Go
very
Pima
much.
Panthers, right, Dr. Nance? All right, so we're going to move on to Action 12D, Approval of Guaranteed Maximum Price, GMP number 2 for RFQ number 17086, Construction Manager at Risk Services for New and Repurposed Space at Cheyenne Traditional School. Also a wonderful school as well.
Absolutely. Mr. Rayland.
They're all great. Thank
Good evening,
you.
President Perleberg, members of the board, Dr. Birdwell. Today, we're in front of you to really do the last piece so we can really get working on Cheyenne. Chase Building Team, you approved on the 6th for Chase to get started on the front parking lot and some other areas, and that is well underway. If you've been to the campus, you'll see that they've got a lot of work going on already. So I wanted to share, because on the 6th there was some question about the gymnasium and its design. And so I wanted to touch just ever so briefly. We brought a presentation. You've seen this before, but I wanted you to see really just the work that we've done on the gym. Not much, because it really didn't need much. Moving a little slow here. So one of the questions a couple weeks back was offices, curtain, locker rooms. We went out and we assessed our current gymnasiums, and every one of them is a little bit different. And so we looked very specifically at ANLC, soon to be known as Echo Canyon, and also at Copper Ridge. I wasn't here when Copper Ridge was built, but that is one spectacular facility. I don't think they built it as a K-8. It almost looks like a high school. So it's almost hard to compare that one. And then ANLC. From a square footage standpoint, the hardwood floor alone is going to be 2,000 square feet larger at Cheyenne than at ANLC. Just the hardwood floor itself. We've increased from one large PE office to two smaller offices. We took a little bit of space out of the storage space to create those two offices that had been requested. The curtain, ANLC and Copper Ridge don't have a curtain. There's been much discussion about the curtain. We've shown the curtain here in the drawing, but I still don't believe that that's where it needs to be. If there's additional questions, Grace can certainly talk to that a little bit. She's got her opinion as the principal how that should be. She's talked with her PE teachers, and I think we're past that at this point. So we would very much like to move forward with the design that we have. And with that moving forward, our expectation and our commitment with Chase Building Team, Orcott Winslow, myself, and Grace, we fully expect to open that gym on March 30th in time for 8th grade promotion for next year. So we will ask for questions and then a vote.
All right, wonderful. Board Member Hartman.
Oh, gosh, I'm good. Thank you, though, Dennis.
Board Member Kirby. Don't
Thank
tease
you.
me.
Thank you, Mr. Rayler. And while you're sticking your neck out on that March 30th commitment, so. They're sitting right back behind you over here, and you got the PTO president over
Yep.
here.
We are very much committed to that effort.
Okay.
So
thank you for addressing it. And please, I appreciate your sense of urgency and your clear level of commitment, but I do want to disclaim, I as a board member recognize that bad things can happen along the way in construction. So please, I want the community to understand, if it's not March 30th and it's April 10th, then we should still be good. We are making a goodwill effort to get there. Can you also address the science lab timeline, the science building timeline?
they're all going to be built at the same time.
Same time, simultaneous.
Everything's happening at the same time.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Any additional questions? I just want a couple clarifications. I see two offices
Yep.
up there.
Two offices now.
Obviously, an assessment was done of how many PE teachers would be.
Decision was made.
A decision was made. Locker rooms, obviously, ANLC's population, much smaller than Cheyenne's. All those wonderful calculations have been done along with the staff that live and breathe on this campus every day.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct? Yes.
If I could address the locker rooms real quick, the locker changing rooms, it's not a locker room, is really intended for the after-school athletics. At Cheyenne, they do not change out for PE. So if there's 300 middle school kids at Cheyenne, they don't change out for PE, so they don't need 300 lockers to have those kids change out. This is specifically for the volleyball kids, the softball kids, the soccer kids. And when you calculate the number of kids on a team, boys and girls, the number's right about 40 when you have two sports happening at the same time. So we feel that the number that we have is exactly efficient enough to make sure those teams, if they so desire, can change out before their game in a private area, not in a toilet stall, and be able to put their gear away. So that is the exact reason for that design. And that was through conversation with the athletic director at that campus.
Thank you for that logic and working through those conversations. Do we have any additional questions? Okay. Ready to, yes, board member.
I'll just say
Beckham.
thank you for putting the square footage up there. I think that's helpful for people to understand sizing.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to make a motion? Anyone else want
Please
the
let
honor?
me.
Okay, you take the honor.
I move that we approve the guaranteed maximum price, GMP number 2, for RFQ number 17086, CMAR services for new and repurposed space at Cheyenne Traditional School.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby and Board Member Kravitz. All in favor? Aye. Aye, motion passes 5-0.
And I want to
Hey,
thank.
Cheyenne, it's
Yeah,
coming.
Cheyenne, I want to thank the governing board, but I also want to take a moment to thank Principal Grace, are you back there?
Yeah.
The Principal, PTO, President, thank you both for your wonderful communication and working with the team. Chase Construction is going to do a fabulous job. Orcott Winslow, great job. Dennis, wonderful leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to our next action item, 12E, approval of International Baccalaureate IB Middle Years Program.
Dr. Johnson is going to talk with us a little bit about the IB opportunity along with Principal Kellen. So I think they're making their way up.
Thank you.
Good. Oh, and we have our new Desert Mountain High School principal, Dr. Hirsch. Thank you for being here.
Oh.
Thank you. I'm trying to escape.
Please begin.
President Perleberg, board members, Superintendent Birdwell and Sandra. We come to you tonight to talk about the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program. Our team has changed slightly. As you recall, Desert Mountain High School Principal Nikki Welford was one of the original members of the team, and she has pursued a new opportunity in Mesa. And so I want to welcome to our team Dr. Lisa Hirsch as the new principal of Desert Mountain High School. She's like 2 days on the job, so she said, please don't ask me to say anything or.
I promise you our board meetings are not normally like this, Dr. Hirsch.
This has been great.
So she probably will not get to answer too many questions, but we'll excuse her this time till she gets her.
Tomorrow.
Well, yeah, head of schools training she would need to attend. So, but I have our trustee, Terry Kellen, principal of Mountainside Middle School. And so she's going to help me with this presentation as we talk about the IB, the International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program. You also were given the feasibility study at the November 2016 Governing Board Work Study meeting. You had asked that a feasibility study be done that was conducted from October until April 2017, about 6 months, and that report is presented to you as the feasibility study. We also were able to talk to you about that in April at the work study session as well.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. This is really a review for everybody. One of the most important things to remember about MYP is it is inclusive. It is for all students, totally different from the diploma program at Desert Mountain for juniors and seniors. So, and middle years program is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's a 5-year program. It's ideal. That is the ideal model through IB. So we are really excited to be proposing that model. And MYP is not a curriculum. It is a structure and the way we will deliver our current curriculum to middle school students at a time when middle years are so, as we know, vulnerable. designed to really reach our students to stretch and think outside of themselves, outside of the school, outside of our community, and think globally. There are 8 curriculum groups. There's 2 significant differences are that design course up there, which I've talked about with you before. And I will say again that fits in really well at Mountainside with our current STEM class, so we are excited about that. There will be changes and tweaks needed, but we are very excited to implement that as a course and a course requirement. And the language acquisition. So right now, as you know, in middle school, language acquisition is a choice, and it will be a requirement through MYP, which hence the 8 curriculum groups instead of our typical. So our district's been very proactive in this. That has really going to help with this model of language acquisition, because next year I have for the first time an offering for 6th graders. The model will change as if this is approved and we move forward, that we will have to increase obviously that 6th grade option, but I'm thrilled that next year I have 2 sections of that 6th grade multicultural choice. And as I just said, it's 8 curricular areas. I just highlighted language acquisition and design, it's definitely going to be significant increase in integration, significant integration, which will come through many hours of training for our teachers, as they will be required to integrate disciplines. And MYP will be culminated during their sophomore year with a personal project, which will be connected to what they have been doing, particularly in 7th and 8th grade at the middle years. So it's not, and of course 9th grade. So it's not all of a sudden they have this big project they've never heard of in 10th grade. It is something that will gradually be talked about and discussed and explored for that 5th year personal project. So that's really exciting. We hope, we haven't talked to Dr. Hirsch about this, but we hope that some of our middle school teachers can be included in that sophomore year personal project as far as evaluation and closure to that. So those are really the significant differences in what you will see. I do want to say, I'm going to go off script a little bit. I was worried, I actually mentioned this to board member Hartman, I don't want what was said in the board agenda to be misleading, because this really is a 3-year process. I think it says it will be implemented in 18-19. Depending on how fast we can move this coming year, I don't want to move fast and not do it right. But really, IB will tell you it's a 3-year process. So possibly in 18-19, we will see those 8 curricular areas in place, which will mean a significant change to our bell schedule. Not the day, our bell schedule. And then the 3rd year be full implementation and have the goal being a candidate school in that 3rd year. So I just want to be very clear on that and not any misinformation out there. Since we originally thought we were going to start a little bit earlier, which is fine, but again, I just want to clarify the timeline. Which leads into the next slide. Doesn't totally go off script.
I was good. Oh, you're doing this. Just teasing.
My brain isn't like this.
I know Terry said, please, can you do that one? Well, I'm not going to go through all the details of the process, but it is quite a lengthy process. When we originally had been looking at this, the first year was really going to be this 16-17 year. So some preliminary work was done, but because of the change of personnel and other pressing issues, it was decided to look at this process as the new budget was being considered for next year, to make sure that that we could support that. So it does require this school profile. There's a lot of research done. It would be what I would call your advanced ed accreditation on steroids, that they look at from a global perspective, an international perspective, much more so than a local or a state perspective, like an advanced ed accreditation. They provide a tremendous amount of professional development and training throughout the process. Once the application process is done and you are selected as a candidate school, you basically have to function a complete entire school year as a candidate school. So that's when Ms. Kellen said, we hope to be ready for the candidate school, but we might need to delay that 1 year depending on where we are with being able to implement all the various processes. And IB, because it is an international process, will not rush through the process to have another school or another 2 schools be IB schools. They will want to make sure that it is done with fidelity. So we'll monitor that and provide updates along the way should you approve this. So when we talk about the timeline, this past year, there was a study session done in November, a board meeting where it was presented, this information. The leadership training occurred, heads of school training. They do require that the principals, assistant principals, and district administration attend a head of schools training. And so the first team attended that, not knowing there were going to be some changes in administration. Then the governing board requested a feasibility study that was done and presented to the governing board during the study session. And then this evening we're bringing it forward and requesting action. Should it be approved this evening for next school year, July 1 through June 30th, we would begin this teacher training, and all the teachers would go through particular trainings, content specific, but also interdisciplinary training as well. We would put in place our MYP coordinator positions. Those are, each school would need 2 sections, 2 periods a day, 2 hours a day of an MYP coordinator. That is a requirement by IB. That person works very closely with sort of facilitating the whole process, as well as making sure that the application is complete, that the training occurs, keeping all the details of the whole process in place. We would need to make some changes in our high school and middle school planning guides, and that would just fall in line with the normal process of when we review that. We begin the review in the summer, early fall, and then present that to the governing board for adoption of the high school planning guide. And we would want to write the new courses. We would need some course modifications at middle school, and then, as you know, at the high school, we have what's called pre-IB courses, and we would replace those courses with the IB middle year program courses. There also is, in October, we would need 2 new administrators to go to that head of schools training, since I took Dr. Mitch Van Echten's place, and then Dr. Lisa Hirsch would also need to attend head of schools training. And we would begin this marketing strategy. So we have a 3-year plan. We work very closely with Erin and her team on community education and promotion, as this would be a district program, not just for the Desert Mountain Learning Community. Then our hope would be that we would have our application for candidacy done in April in 2018. That will depend on getting everything in place in this year, but it's a lofty goal, but we're going to strive really hard, if approved, to make that. So if we become a candidate school 2018-19, this would be the schedule. If we need to delay that 1 more year, we can delay it, but we still would be moving in the direction. The curricular changes would be occurring. The structure would be changing as far as interdisciplinary teams. It would also give our teachers more time and experience with implementing the IB philosophy and the changes in curriculum and instructional strategies. The professional development is ongoing, marketing strategy. We would be given an IB consultant to come and work with us. They would come and make a visit to verify, very much like our advanced ed visits, only it would be certainly a little more involved in that. Then in 1920, they would be authorized IB middle year program schools. So both schools would have that identification, since 6, 7, 8 is at Mountainside Middle School and 9, 10 is at Desert Mountain High School. And there's continued ongoing professional development, marketing plan, and then the program maintenance and sustainability. Budget projections were just adjusted slightly from the last time we presented. The application candidacy fee was moved from 16-17 budget year to the 17-18 budget year if approved. We would have two administrators that would need training. It would be an additional $4,000. The rest of the budget remained the same. No increase on the application candidacy fee. It was just originally in the 16-17 budget, and it was moved to the 17-18 budget. 18-19, if we are able to be identified as a candidate school, there's a fee for that. They charge a fee to visit. We would continue to have training, substitutes for the teachers out of classroom, the coordinators' release time. They have some mandatories. They have a curriculum unit warehouse they require. And we're looking at the need for additional staffing because the language piece is extended, and there may be a few of the other sections that we would need for that. So we're anticipating a 0.6 FTE at each school possibly, and then our supply budgets. That has not changed since the last presentation. And then 1920, it would be included, it would be the IB, MYP designated authorized schools. So this would be a budget that would continue on if the student enrollment stays the same. If we increase enrollment, then we would be bringing in more revenue, but also then maybe needing to add additional staff. You'll notice the personal project advisor, that there is this required project after the at the end of the sophomore year that they continue to work on, and they charge $100 per student to have that person in place to work with the students on their particular projects. So if you look at the 4-year commitment, it's $426,970 estimate on that piece, with an annual ongoing cost of $191,450. So just under $200,000 for ongoing cost for a budget projection. This provides all that same information in a spreadsheet as you look across. We also talked about the challenges, because we want to make sure that we're transparent and we talk about some of the items that we would need to be addressed as we move along the process. So master scheduling, as Ms. Kellen said, would be an item that we'd need to look at, because they have 8 periods in the day. So we would have a little bit more creative master scheduling done. Also at the high school, we are anticipating at least half our freshmen and sophomores would be in the IB middle years program. So there would be some master scheduling items, not much different than what we're already doing, depending on the number of students. Articulation of middle and high school schedules, so we would need to make sure that we have some articulation. With the schools being next door to each other, that helps a lot in that piece. We would be continually looking at our instructional minutes, making sure we're meeting the needs, additional staffing needs as was provided in the budget projections. We would have possibly some movement of staffing from Desert Mountain to Mountainside Middle School, so they could share staff. And so we would need to look at that and plan accordingly. It's a feature that we have at many of our schools that share staff. We just need to remember that we would need to plan for that, travel time, et cetera, making sure they are not overloaded with excessive number of preps. Recruitment of highly qualified world language teachers, that's always a piece that's difficult for us to recruit, but we have an amazing team in our curriculum area that works really hard in that area. There is a slight impact to elective programs. We would continue to evaluate that because of the additional course requirements, but understanding that we're still comprehensive in our middle school and high school to make sure we're ensuring that those additional electives are offered and ways to be able to participate in those. And then a transition from the pre-diploma program to IB MYP at Desert Mountain, which I talked about, the pre-IB program that they currently have, we would be transitioning to the IB middle years program. Next steps, we bring this to you to ask for approval and endorsement. We would be doing continuing education of community and staff, allocate funds for budget, and then begin the application fee as well. And that's the end of our slide. We have to entertain questions.
Board Member Beckham.
Really excited about having this program be part of SUSD and be able to provide parents another offering and students another offering that goes towards the rigor that we're hoping that we're able to provide both at the middle school and the high school. And I love the fact that it cascades into high school. So I'll ask one of my first questions there. You had mentioned 6th through 10th grades will be offered. You're anticipating that all the students in the middle school, 6 through 8, would be participating?
Yes.
And approximately how many students would that be, like next year, do you think?
Well, by the time you mean if it was next year?
Yeah,
It
just
would
say
be
next year.
all-
What was your enrollment this year, and I'll just use that.
700,
So-
698.
Oh, okay, much bigger than I thought. Okay, 698, and then you said you're anticipating about half of the 9th and 10th graders.
Eventually, it's going to be all of them. But as we continue to, we talked about having a school within a school because they allow for that like we do now. So I would say at least half.
Okay, so then that brings up, will you be able to take everybody who wants to participate?
Mm-hmm.
So you'll just make room even if there's some smaller class or a little bit larger? Okay, great. So you
That's
don't
the
have to-
adjustment. That's some of our challenges.
Just, okay, all right, great. And then my last question is did you outline any metrics or method of measurement so you can determine how this program is successful?
Thank you, Member Beckham, President Perleberg, Superintendent. While they are not finalized, we do know that in our feasibility study, we talked about the success metrics. And so we've identified 4, and they'll be tweaked as we look at the ongoing process. But one of the items is we would increase open enrollment requests at Mountain Side Middle School. And because we believe there will be an increase in students wanting to attend the IB middle year program. We also believe that this will feed into our IB program at the high school. So we look to have increase in students attending the IB program at Desert Mountain. As you have seen in our feasibility study, many districts have even the IB primary program. So for us to extend and have the middle year program is very appealing because we do know that parents are going to neighboring districts that have a middle years program because of that continuation 6-12. The other piece is we really would love for all our students to achieve the IB diploma, and currently not all of our students are seeking the IB diploma. And so we believe we'll have an increase in students with the IB diploma. They'll have additional years to prepare and understand the rigor that's associated with it versus just during their pre-IB freshman, sophomore year, and then IB junior, senior year. Sometimes it's a little daunting, and particularly if they're wanting to expand their comprehensive program and electives. And then we believe that the system will be self-sustaining. As we said, we need about $200,000 a year to sustain the program. And we anticipate that we will have enough open enrollment students and students that come back to us that maybe have left and gone to other district schools to participate in this particular program, because we know it's a lot of our parents in that particular part of our district are very much international, global-minded thinking, and it's one of their priorities oftentimes.
Thank you. Thank you for having that for me. I just thought of one thing that maybe just to throw it out there to think about is, I know you said to increase to 100% of IB diploma. Isn't there a grading on that, so that maybe even have a measurement be a percentage makes the higher marks? I don't understand the IB program, but something that really goes towards the true academic outcomes, I think would be very helpful.
Absolutely. We can do that and break that down by scores and percentages as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Hartman.
Once again, thank you for the outstanding work, and welcome Principal Hirsch to the SUSD. We're delighted to have you. I wanted to just highlight one other conversation point that Principal Kellen and I had before, which is around the marketing for the program. Because sooner than later, I'm just looking at the timeline strategy here. We talked a little bit about this. I think there's an opportunity for not only open enrollment in the program, but as parents think about, oh, this middle school program's coming, they may want to bring kids over to some of the feeder K-5 schools sooner than later. So I would encourage the collaboration with our marketing to even start thinking about a little bit more targeted strategically, even sooner if possible.
And Erin emailed me just this morning about, I didn't tell you this, about, because we're redoing our flyers, our brochures, thank you. And we're going to wait until, see what happened tonight, because she wants to look at that, depending on what happens tonight. Yeah.
All right, Board Member Kravitz.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. You mentioned increase in open enrollment. So when you say that, are you talking about open enrollment within the district, students from other schools within our district, or increasing open enrollment from outside the district? And will part of our marketing strategy include targeting people who currently aren't sending, who live in Scottsdale but aren't currently sending their student to a Scottsdale school?
Thank you, Member Kravitz. Absolutely, those are really some of our key populations, is the students that are currently not attending Scottsdale School District. We want to target those families as well. Open enrollment, of course, we would target, we have our Fountain Hills very close to that area. Some of the students that have left our district and have gone to Paradise Valley, for example, Deer Valley, Mesa Public Schools, recruiting those students back. It is a school, it would be a program of choice in our district. So if there are students from some of the other K-8 schools or elementary schools that want to choose into that program, very much like our Math Science Academies at Saguaro, it would be another option for parents to choose. And like all of our programs, we would make our parents aware of all of the different district-wide programs that are available.
Thank you.
Board Member Kirby.
Thank you all, and thank you for coming tonight. You sat through a long board meeting. They're all like this. Don't listen to what they say. Don't listen to them. They're all like this. Okay, so I have clarification questions. The first one, I think you touched on it, but my mind was processing something else. Of the $430,970 grand total, how much of that figure is ongoing versus one-time costs coming in every year?
So Thank you, Member Kirby. The ongoing cost would be what's listed in the 2019-2020 year. We have the annual IB fee, which is $10,450. So every year would mirror this last budget year of 1920 when we're in full
At that point.
At
Okay.
that point.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. To Board Member Beckham's question on metrics, I think this is what you were getting at when you said increase the attaining the diploma, but I'm not sure. But if it's not, I'd like for you to consider this as a metric, and that's retention between the sophomore and junior year. So
Yes.
not necessarily passing the
Right.
test, while that's important, that is a metric. But the other metric that I'd like for you to consider is retention, because based upon what I've been told anecdotally, is that we lose a lot of
do.
students after that sophomore year.
We do. Thank you for putting that out, Member Kirby. Yes, I probably didn't state that exactly clearly, is that matriculation from IB MYP into the IB program, because we do have students that are in the pre-IB, but they don't matriculate into the IB program. So we do want to increase the number that do matriculate into the
Okay.
IB.
Thank you. And then last question, once this is full-blown and it's fully, all 5 years are staffed and we have students in all 5 years, 6 through 10, what happens if a student transfers or comes to Desert Mountain High School as a freshman? Would they be able to get into the program in year 4, or is it not an option at that point?
Member Kirby, I'm looking here, yes, making sure that she's saying the same thing. But yes, students that come into our program, while it may be a little bit of a learning curve with rigor-wise, but most parents would know that and decide that that's a good fit for their program, their particular student. They don't have to worry about catching up on curriculum, because 9th grade, 10th grade, they're individual courses. So it would be very similar to the types of courses that they would take. They just would be the IB courses in
and
content area.
likewise, if a student transfers in 11th grade, they can still get into the IB. They just would have missed the pre-IB. Is that true?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. You have an option to come into any of those programs at any break time, any year time.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if there's no further comments or questions, do I have a motion? I will make a motion that we approve the International Baccalaureate IB Middle Years Program.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you all.
Well done, team. I look
Yay,
forward to working with you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, we move on to action item 12F, approval of 2017-2018 high school robotics course pilot program.
Governing Board, I was challenged by some high school students and their teachers in the robotics world, and there are those who thought this was impossible. Matter of fact, I even read some blogs that said I absolutely had no authority. But yes, you do, Governing Board. I don't, but you do. It's called a pilot. What we do is it gives us an opportunity to try a program to see if there's an interest to be able to build it. If it is successful, then we are able to put curriculum on display, go forward, and make it a permanent course into the future. We believe we have the students, the staff, and the readiness to be able to go forward with this. And our school district is ready. We have already been doing some of these courses in the middle level, but we have not been doing high school robotics courses. So we have the interest, and I think it would be advantageous to also not limit it to one high school, but to allow all 5 high schools to be able to go down this pathway. And I don't know if Dr. Johnson wants to add to that, but that's the summary. We're excited.
All right, Board Member Hartman.
I'm wholly supportive of this and very excited for the opportunity. I did have a question I've been meaning to ask you about this. If we're going down a path where it's co-curricular, are we still using that language?
Yeah, co-curricular just basically means that there are opportunities outside of school to compete in competitions. So the robotics has a club and it competes, but it also has class time and instructional pieces tied to the overall curriculum.
Okay, and the reason why I asked the question is I know a lot of the funding today actually comes from school tax credit, so I didn't want us to unintentionally move ourselves away from being able to raise funds from a school tax credit perspective. But
Thank you for that. And also should note to the governing board that the Charros have also volunteered startup money for curriculum materials. So we have received an opportunity for that as well. And we are going to match that within our budget. Our intention is to give each of the courses $5,000 startup.
We love our Charros, don't we? All right, any other, I'm sorry, Board Member Beckham.
Thank you. So I have a question. So you just said about the co-curricular and it would be competitive. So if you take the elective, are you required to compete?
No.
Okay.
No. You can take the class and choose not to be part of the club or the extracurricular. Unlike in the marching band,
Okay.
band directors don't give you that flexibility.
Flexibility, right. Okay, okay. And do you have any idea about what you're expecting for participation at each site?
I don't know. Dr. Johnson, you have some preliminaries?
Thank you. We're looking at, in numbers wise, the students that would be currently participating in the robotics club. So we have a list of that. The principals have already been, I've already sent them a preliminary email that says, if this is a go, here's what you would do, here's how you would identify students. And we anticipate that each school will have somewhere between 15 and 25 students in this pilot program. So it's about the same as who have participated. There may be some too that won't be in the class, but will be continuing in the club.
So that's about one class. What happens if you end up with 50? Will you make 2 classes or will you limit it?
Oh, golly, I'd love 50.
Okay, so we have the capacity to.
Yeah, and the following year, what we want to be able to do is create an advanced level so that students actually have the ability to advance as well.
Okay, all right, great. And did you mention, I know you mentioned the Charros, but is there a cost that is associated with this program? How much is that and is it in the budget?
We have FTE allocation of 1.0 FTE, so we are anticipating one section at each of our 5 high schools. So while we will offer it to the students who are particularly interested in robotics, we know that because there's a lot of courses that they are trying to get in their schedule, there may be some scheduling conflicts as they try to switch from one elective to another or add it as a 0 hour or a 7th class as well. So we know there'll be some that won't be able to fit it in their schedule and they'll participate in the club. So we think we'll fill one section. We're not anticipating during this pilot time to fill more than one section.
It's about 9,000 per site.
Okay, all right, thank you. And it is in this, it's in the budget?
Yeah, in the FTE. It's pretty cool.
You just said something that made me think of something, and then I just lost it when I went back to
Hate when
budget.
it happens.
Senior or high school students already have their schedules, correct? So this will be something new that they'll just have to.
We'll be having those teachers contact those club members to begin with, and then other students, the first week of school typically have the ability to make schedule changes, and then we shut down after, typically, we shut down after week 1 schedule changes because it creates staffing nightmares. So hopefully we clean that up during arena scheduling.
I have also prepared each of the assistant principals of ed services that are working on master schedule. I said, where would you put a section of robotics, who would teach it, and sort of figure out where you could put that in a schedule. So all the 5 teachers are identified preliminarily and where it would fit in the master schedule best. So we've done that preliminary work ahead of time.
Oh, that's great. Okay, and just last is, and I recognize it's a pilot program so that you'll be figuring out this going forward, so I'm not asking for an answer right now, but just to remember how will you measure the success of the program if you bring it back to be a non-pilot program and just part of the curriculum. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, Board Member Kirby.
Thank you. And like, as my colleagues have stated, very excited about this, long overdue. I have full confidence this will be successful because of the success we've already had in Scottsdale. And to that point, because we're so kind of late at the game for next August, and while I really do appreciate us moving forward now instead of waiting an entire year, I would ask that we manage our expectations for the first year out, since we're here in June talking about this implementation, and let's give it at least an entire another year. Get it in the high school planning guide in February, give it at least another year to take hold, if not another year behind that, because I would think something like this would take at least 2 years if we were doing it back in February. So but I'm also optimistic it might take off a lot faster than we expect.
Thank you, Member Kirby. I think one of the biggest reasons this will be a big success is they do already offer robotics at the middle grades. So it's an elective offered at many of our middle schools and K-8s.
So to that point, you just actually, are the teachers at the high school or the principals contacting the middle schoolers, their incoming freshmen as well, or just the high school clubs?
Member Kirby, they will be contacting their incoming as well. They'll first fill it with their current students, but anticipate if they have slots to bring in the freshmen as well.
Okay.
All right.
I would just like to say thank you to the team that worked on this, because 6 weeks to the date that the students requested, we met that time frame, and that was a huge challenge.
Very exciting.
All right, Board Member Hartman.
Just one last quick comment. Dr. Birdwell, you said something that triggered a thought. I really do want to underscore thanking the Charles for stepping up on this. As being on the Charles Foundation, I can share with you that these are new dollars. These are all new dollars that they're proactively finding and committing to this program. And I also want to underscore this is an offer to consider. This fits really well in the bus workforce initiative. And so in terms of coaches, field trips, potential internships, all those things that can be built off of robotics, that's another excellent partnership that's eager and willing and ready to kind of sink their teeth in supporting this program as well. So.
Yes, thank you. Very exciting. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the proposed pilot program for a high school robotics course for the 2017-18 school year.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby, and thank you, Board Member Kravitz. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right, moving on in the final stretch. Item 13, future items. I do have noted that we get to talk about the budget more in August, yay. Comparing the budget versus actual 16-7 budget, and with a look at the 17-18 budget as well. Do you have any requests for additional future agenda items? Board Member Hartman.
I would like to add to our always growing list an opportunity to talk about what that, there's actually a term for it, that gain sharing bonus model, what it potentially could look like, sharing back some of the one-time cost savings with our potentially certified and classified, what that would look like. So I'd like to put that on the agenda, because the team that contributes together, wins together at the end. So I think there'd be an opportunity there. And then secondly, when you're talking about the systems work, it jogged something in my mind, and it was a conversation that I think Ms. Smith and I already had. And, it's that fresh set of eyes that finds those improvements in the system, particularly when it's process and systems. And I think we should talk about revisiting who our relationship with our external auditors are, because I think that relationship is a little stale, and we've learned a lot in some of the bigger contracts we've looked at, and so I think we should rethink pursue a potential new external auditor relationship, or at least RFP for something like that.
Yes.
Okay, Board Member Kirby.
Thank you. A request for just an update on the tax rate after the discussion with the county. next fall.
Discussion with county heading. All right, and item 14, dates of upcoming meetings. Our next board meeting is our study session on August 10th at 3 p.m. Our regular governing board meeting next will be August 15th at 5 p.m. here. Everybody have a wonderful July. Item 15, governing board reports. Do I have any governing board reports? No, excellent. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Thank you, Board Member Kirby. Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Beckham. All in favor? Aye, motion passes 5-0. Happily. Have a great summer, everyone.